and what it means for the future of Botswana's diamond industry and its broader economic growth. Good evening and welcome to Botswana Tonight, Victor.
How are you?
We talk about the agreement between DBS and Botswana. We talk about the negotiations. We talk about the fact that we never know what's contained in the agreement itself. At the same time, we talk about how this partnership has brought so many developments in the country. We talk about diamonds for development, for example, and I think that's the story really when we talk about the place of origin. That's the narrative that follows our diamond story. Perhaps let's just take it back to the discovery that there's something in this dry place where nobody thought anything could come out of it. Let's just take it back there before we focus on the significance of tomorrow.
Thank you very much. You are right to say we are where we are because of where we come from. And partnership Yarona Labor and DBS started way back when we allowed them on our soil to actually do what say mining, but it's prospecting. We allow them to prospect for possible finding the diamond. Many are in the 60s, late 60s. They found they found the diamond go Rapa, and that's how the Rapa mine was opened. Many are going to hold so let's say 1969. We then formed a joint venture company, the now company that we called Debswana. You'd know that Deb from DBS, Swana from Botswana. That's how we got to be where we are. Ultimately, we end up reaching a point where we are 50-50 joint venture, where DBS owns 50% and we own 50% as a country. But even apart from the shareholding that we have called Debswana, or that we co-own with DBS at Debswana, we also took a decision in the 80s to also buy a stake. We started really 5% more DBS, and then we grew up to the current 15%, where now we own 15% DBS. And now, as you might know, the parent company DBS, being Anglo American, is thinking of selling DBS, and there's a possibility we are also thinking as a country to see if we can increase our stake. So as a 15% go home DBS. But yeah.
I think it's interesting that you bring in the Anglo-American into the conversation, because we just learned what they have done in the last 2 days is to write down the value of DBS, 2.9 billion, if I'm not mistaken. What does that mean in the broader scheme of things in terms of our relationship? I mean, we talk about relationship with the DBS as if we are not DBS. I think maybe that's also something we need to look into. But in terms of our relationship with DBS and conversations that are ongoing, henceforth, what does that mean?
Remember what Anglo-American is a company in the company why the company DBS largely mo Botswana in an interest mo ditemane, but bana le di company tse dingwe go Africa borwa tse ile gore di lebile bo platinum, di lebile di tota di epa bo platinum le bo copper. So in our last year bana ba tsa tshotse gore ba rekisa ngwe ya dingwe tsa di company tsa bone, tse dingwe ba di rekisa partially, tse dingwe ba di ntsha gotlhelele. Mengwe ya di company tse ile gore ne ba supe gore ba batla gore ba di rekise ke yone ya DBS. Me ile gore ha ngwaga ntse ha ba tseba banka intse di financial statements tsa bone tsa ngwaga le ngwaga, they have to do an assessment there gore DBS as an asset ba evalue ka tsela ntseng ya go gore mo balance sheeting ya bone go gore le wena hela ha ona le di asset dingwe kgotsa di koloi mo jarete fleet ya dikoloi o kgona go bua gore ma o fiti o ja 30,000 ngwaga ta ke go value 45,000 kana ngwaga ta ke value 27,000. So se se diragetseng the write down o buang ka ene ke gone gore ba Anglo American ba rile ba hokuditse the value e ba e bona mo DBS, and that is in accounting terms that is largely done because go lebile potentially a company. I think bona ba Anglo American ba lebile gone gore the lab grown diamonds di simolotse go tsenya competition e seng kana ka sepe mo natural diamonds, so seo se dira gore boleng jwa DBS as a company bo boele ko tlase. So they just looked at the potential ya go tisa madi ya this company, so they in the books tsa bone tsa financials ba bo ba hokotsa the value ya yone DBS. But it also could be an advantage to us, because remember gore kgantele ne ke bua gore re ka nna ra akanyetsa gore re oketse stake sa rona ko DBS. So ha o ya gore ka maufiti e le gore o hukoditswe value o itse go 27,000 ha go swane le ha nne mongwe wa teng a rile ke okeditse value ya maufiti to 45,000. So as a buyer, it could work for us, but in the long term, depending on whether we have the potential, could also work negatively.
Okay, let's just go back then to the relationship and the partnership with DBS. What we understand is that we've got two sets of partnerships here, or two sets of agreements here. You talk about what we have with Debswana. You talk about our shareholding at DBS. But over and above that, we often hear that there's a sales and a marketing agreement, and then there's a mining lease agreement. Just break down these for us such that we are able to follow.
Akere ka melaong ya rona ya ditswa kgotsa minerals company ngwe le ngwe ile gore epa kgotsa e nna le moepo e neelwa license ke government, mme ka molaong wa rona gape government ona le tshwanelo ya gore ga go bona mine o mošwa whether ke temane kgotsa ke kopore, government ona le tshwanelo gore o ka tsaya stake kgotsa o ka nna le di-shares mo company eo. So se se diragetseng ke gore ko go wa di temane tsone tsa wa Debswana kgotsa wa DBS re ne ra tsaya stake go gone ke ta go nela sky ka o mongwe go teng Lukhara o le gore ba pile le ya yone ya DBS ko lethakane la orapa ga rena sabe mo gone re le lehatshe la Botswana, mme government ona le tshwanelo ya gore ha bata o ka tsaya, mme re benefit in the form ya di royalties. So this mining license di issue for a certain period, 5 to 10 years. So tsa Debswana kgotsa tsa DBS di ne le gore di ne part of the negotiation le gore di either government di extend kgotsa asa di extend. So government as part of the negotiations tsa the sales part of it, they also decided mo gore ba oketsa di license tsone tsa mining. But apart from mining being operations, gona le tsone tsa di sales gore kana yano le Debswana le pa di temane mme le tshwanetse gore le di rekise, mme ha le di rekisa ka gore re own 50%, DBS own 50%, re le tshwanetse gore go nne le gore produce kgotsa the rough diamonds le dintshang le itse gore le stake sa rona ke bokae. That's why it's very the critical for company e bidong go te Okavango Diamond Company kgotsa ODC ke yone le gore yone Botswana we own 100%. So the 30% in go bua go te ra go gore go 30% re bo re go up to 50%, ke yone le gore specifically o rekisiwa ke bone ba ODC. So the sales agreement dealt directly with the rough tse di tswang ko Debswana go ne gore ha Debswana se rekisa through DBS has reka from Debswana through DTCB in a list stakes sa rona ke bokae sa DBS ke bokae.
Okay, it's interesting that you bring ODC into the picture, but before we even get to ODC, what has taken us for so long for us to get to where we are? What is it that was obtaining before we started seeing Botswana saying, I think I can do better, or I need more in these specific areas? What was obtaining previously, and how did we find ourselves in this particular place where we're saying, now we've got other players? I mean, we can talk about the relocation of DTCB coming into Botswana, later on forming MDC and ODC, like take us through all of that and how we find ourselves here.
When the investors by DBS but e le gore ba tsile go prospect di temane bone obviously ne ba tisa madi ba tisa le technicality part of it. So rona ne re taka le hatsele the resource being the diamond itself. That was our contribution. And if you go back and look into the numbers, in the 80s we in fact almost we had nothing to actually sell apart from benefit the realities. Many are leaders as they came through Borre Mogae, Borre Khama, Borre Masis, Habata, Jaka thatologana ga bone ba ne ba ta ba negotiate di deal, because remember gore this deal tse re bua ka tsone di tsa period ya bo 10 years. So in ya re ka 2036 go no ga dira ene deal e le gore ne ra bona e le gore ba e ne expire ka 2011, me ha expire ka 2011 part of it go bo go former minister wa minerals Rekidikile ba ne ba tsa tshotso gone gore DTCB e le gore e ne le ko London at the time ke e lone le kana le gore le tsa ditemane ko Debswana on behalf of DBS le bo le rekis go bo go as part of the agreement ya 2011 go bo go dumalana gone gore DTCB ta ho dugela mo gaborone e le part of empowerment ya Botswana gone gore a kere ha eta kwana gore ita ka ditiro eta ka gone gore as set up here gore gore duela di lekgetho. And then secondly gone ga o ke diwa the stake sa rona se le gore ra sa in terms of from Debswana. And then we also saw the establishment ya Okavango Diamond Company e le gore to date up to date up to 25% ya di temane e le gore ke di temane tse le gore rough diamonds ra di tsara le hatsi ra di taxes separately away from Debswana. Initially it was an issue gore as a developing country, just to shortly answer your question, as a developing country, obviously you are more interested in foreign investors coming to set up here, but as you develop your own people and your techniques, you can also be able to sell. So I think is a way of saying to us that we are now graduating into a point where we could start thinking of gradually to be on our own and sell our own diamonds.
Okay. Now, fast forward to 2023, if I'm not mistaken. We saw sometime in June, after some long protracted conversations around what was to be. I mean, you just mentioned the increment from 25 to 30. Eventually, we'll get to 50. We started understanding that there's also an agreement in terms of having a Diamond for Development Fund with DBS putting in 1 billion up front, and other monies would come in later. But at that point, we were just told, oh, these are just heads of terms. Other things will come in later. Tomorrow, are we talking about the other things that would come in later? And what are those other things that would come in later?
Yeah, well, I think what they actually meant at the time was that they were not in agreement with certain things. And those things now they've agreed on, and that is why tomorrow they are putting a pen to paper. And I think largely, if you look at the past deals that go too public in terms of what exactly is contained. And similarly, even in this round of negotiations, we have got the same kind of setup where we have just a rough idea of what's going on in terms of, largely it has to do with what we know to date now as public, is that the allocations are the rough diamonds, the 1 billion puller fund, and also the party, the renewal of the mining licenses. But other than that, we don't actually get the finer part of the deal. And I don't think one would expect to even Horakamoso would get even furthermore. The only difference would be whether there's a tweak to those numbers. That is the only difference that one could anticipate for tomorrow.
It's quite interesting, because for the longest time, I remember 2019, as far back as 2019, even earlier than that, Botswana had been calling for, we want transparency, we want transparency. Is this by design that chances are we're not going to know what's in there? Is it by default? Is it, what exactly is it that we can only know this high level, but we can't know anything else?
I think largely remember we are dealing with, remember DBS used to have what this book they used to sell diamonds with. It's a very sensitive information where there are other players, because if you look, DBS globally, it competed a Russian outfit called Alrosa, and pricing, I think, originally back in the years 80s, from the 80s into the 90s, DBS used a model that one would call exclusive buyers and exclusive sellers, where they were exclusively buying from certain countries like us, Canada, South Africa, and Namibia, and then they would have exclusive buyers, and that allowed them to grow into a monopoly, also to control the prices. And in a way, it benefited us as a country, because the dividend that we are making from the monopoly on dira ke DBS. Re bona madi out of it. But what we now need to know is whether if we were to move into a space where now Botswana increases its stake more DBS, are we able to continue selling at the same rate and getting the same benefits?
Okay.
Yeah.
This signing comes at a time where the diamond industry has obviously hit a slump. Although as a country we still keep on looking at diamonds as what will rescue us out of the economic crisis we find ourselves in. But the diamond industry itself has hit a slump. From the negotiation, from the signing itself, in terms of building some sort of confidence, I don't even know which word to use, just around how structurally our economy is. Is there anything that we can get to just give us that spike to an excitement into the economy?
Yeah, ordinarily, because these negotiations could do one thing from 20. Remember already, like I said, these negotiations this agreement for 10 years. So yeah, 2011, and it's 2021. So the negotiations that they actually had similar 2023, similar 2019, and then at the time we told 2020 already deal like COVID-19, the restrictions and all the like. But they dragged from 2019 all the way up to last year. In fact, we are only going to sign tomorrow. So homo costs and settlement more marketing. So just the fact that Kamoso sign, it could also play a positive role to show that the two biggest, because the agreement or the deal between Botswana and DBS has been largely regarded as one of the most successful triple P models. Private sector and public sector partnership globally. So the fact that it was shaky at some point, Botswana was threatening to walk away from the table and all the like, the markets. So the fact that tomorrow they are signing could now bring a positive momentum or some positive excitement on the markets itself, and possibly impact on the sales as the year goes on. But in terms of projections, already Anglo American shows that the recovery will come in the third quarter of 2025. So unless otherwise there's a miracle in between.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now this is quite obviously important for us as citizens, important for our economy as well. But I want us to just briefly touch on economies and communities, rather, where these diamonds are mined. We are signing this and we are told these are diamonds for development, they benefit everybody. But quite often we hear communities saying, but we only get jobs, we don't see anything. From an impact perspective, going forward, do we hope to see any specific impact into those specific communities, or it's just going to be business as usual?
Yeah, in other countries, what we see, for instance, across the border in Zimbabwe, we know the former leader, the late Robert Mugabe, came up with what they call the indigenization law, where he actually put it in paper that when a company like Debswana or DBS set up in an area like Botswana or in Johannesburg, they need to retain a certain profit. In the community, in the local community. It was a controversial law which actually pitched Mugabe against a lot of people globally, trade economists globally. It's something that one can say we should look at, but it's a model that we can actually adopt as a country at a policy level to say we know how much we are making from the diamonds itself. It can be just 3-4 weeks ago we had budget speech where the resources were allocated. We can actually now put that as part of our budget as a nation to say how much money do we put back to Botswana to Johannesburg. How do we ensure that Botswana, for instance, for the longest has not been how much do we put into that, just in terms of development, and although also there are prospects in other areas like agro Agro-tourism is this big on that. How do we develop infrastructure? That's a conversation that as a nation going forward we can have.
You mentioned that the Debswana DBS Botswana partnership, it's one of the most successful triple P models. Can we replicate that in other industries within this country? Are we able to replicate that?
I'm glad that you asked that question, because in the build-up to the elections last year, the Vice President, I've heard him in so many instances saying that, the now Vice President, the Finance Minister, in so many instances I've heard him saying that Botswana needs to build another Debswana in agro-processing, in food processing, and the like. And I'm just hopeful that ultimately, now that he's in the seat, he'll be able to share the vision, and not just share it, but also ensure that it's implemented, because that's what we actually need, to get the money from the diamonds and build another big Debswana in other fields.
Thank you so much, Victor Baatweng, business journalist, speaking to us about the government of Botswana and DBS partnership and the model that they have been able to use through Debswana, speaking to us about what a significant moment tomorrow is, considering that we just had heads of terms and now it appears both parties have agreed, and we hope this will create some sense of spark and excitement within our economy as we move forward. Up next is the news in Botswana at 7 o'clock.
From the onset, I wish to pronounce that Botswana is open for business. The Minister of Finance, who is also a Vice President of the Republic